Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stephenkingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Once, I reviewed each of his works in the chronological order of publication, but Ka is a wheel, it all goes round again, and here I am, once again, on a new phase of the journey to examine each of the endings of the works of Stephen King, specifically to determine whether or not King deserves his reputation for having an inability to successfully land his endings. The focus of the podcast will be to examine the climax, falling action, and resolution of the endings to each of his novels, and not as short stories, just as novels, and break it down by character, themes, conflict, and plot to determine whether or not it meets the criteria of being an objectively good ending. I will also weigh in on whether or not I happen to personally like the ending. And today, I'm here to discuss the ending of The Regulators. So before I get into the Wikipedia summary, I just wanted to wish everyone a happy 4th. Well, everyone that celebrates the 4th of July. For anyone, overseas, you can ignore this. As I record this is July 3rd, 2021. And it is a rainy 4th of July season, unfortunately. I hope that the weather starts to clear up so everyone can really engage in summer and summer activities. But yeah, I just wanted to say happy 4th, everyone. I think that's very fitting that I am talking about The Regulators, as The Regulators actually is a really perfect summer read. As I stated in my review of Regulators, the book, this is a novel that I believe gets overshadowed by desperation for a couple of reasons. One, I believe that The Regulators is just a weirder novel than Desperation, and it is written under the Richard Bachman moniker. And I think that just subconsciously Stephen King fans just might gravitate more toward Stephen King himself than the deceased Richard Bachman pseudonym. But I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to one more time just plug The Regulators and get some love going towards this novel, this weird, wild, surreal, reality warping story of westerns and cartoons and devilish entities possessing young children. It's a great book. I love The Regulators. There's a lot to love about this novel. But the question is, hey, the ending. Is it good? Is it a good ending? That's what we're going to find out today here on the Stephen King Cast. But first, I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary so I have a basis upon which I can build my analysis of the ending. Along a residential street in the suburban town of Wentworth, Ohio, a paperboy is suddenly shot by a mysterious stranger in a red van. The neighborhood's panicked civilians run for shelter while author Johnny Marinville attempts to contact the police. However, an otherworldly force prevents the call from going through. Two colorful vans, each driven by mysterious and odd strangers, later appear and kill 3 more residents. Former police officer Kali Antrangian directs the affected residents and corrals them to their homes of victim David Carver and veterinarian Tom Billingsley. Only 2 residents remain indoors the entire time, seemingly unfazed. Audrey Weiler and her autistic nephew Seth, whom she has been caring for since the death of his family 2 years ago, remain silent among the chaos. During a trip to the mining town in Desperation, Nevada, an evil, otherworldly entity named Tak took possession of Seth's body after it was released from a mine. Implementing strong mental influence, it later killed Seth's parents and siblings. Tak then forced Audrey's husband to commit suicide. To survive, Audrey took refuge in a mental construct of her creation, modeling her safe place after a favorite retreat. Seth, meanwhile, is sent to the deep recesses of his mind, while Tak is in control and suffers poor hygiene and nutrition as a result of the creature's neglect. Despite his autism, Seth displays a gifted mental strength that is likely the reason Tak was drawn to him in the first place. It also helps keep his mind intact while Tak is in control. Tak is the source of the vans, which are derived from the cartoon Motocops 2200. which Seth watches religiously. Seth often watches a Western movie named The Regulators, and Tack eventually transforms the neighborhood into an Old West landscape with no way to escape, as some of the residents soon find. After several other people are killed in various ways, Seth makes time for Audrey to escape the house while Tack is preoccupied. Audrey puts a laxative in Seth's milk, and she takes the chance to go across the street to the Carver's home, and she explains the situation to the others. Seth ingests the laxative, which causes Tack to leave Seth's body temporarily, as it cannot stand witnessing the boy defecate. She slips back to the house with Johnny to try to rescue Seth before Tack returns, but Cammy Reed follows with a gun. Distraught over the death of her son Jim, Cammy kills Seth and mortally wounds Audrey as Tack tries to re-enter the boy's body. Tack's attention is then diverted to her, and it enters Cammy's body instead. However, she cannot hold up to Tack the way that Seth could, and her body is destroyed as a result of the possession. Tack leaves her in the form of smoke and dissipates into the wind. The vans disappear, and the landscape is returned to its normal state. A short epilogue in the form of a letter reveals that Seth and Audrey's spirits have taken up residence in the meadow from Audrey's mental sanctuary and live there happily in what is implied to be an alternate parallel paradise. Okay, so let's talk about the ending. Specifically, where are we going to talk about? From the climax on. So Audrey drugging Tack, then Cammy shooting Seth and Audrey, Cammy dying, Tack melting in the wind, and then the resolution being the Overlook button, hotel button ending. So in order to talk about the ending, let's talk about the criteria for a good ending. Specifically, does it provide an appropriate conclusion to its characters as consistent with the characters' actions, conflicts, or themes of the book? Yes. I know. I just don't know if anyone has any ground to argue that. I don't really have much more to say about it other than Audrey has been proven to be strong throughout the entirety of the novel. She is strong throughout the conclusion of the novel and up until her death. Her strength at keeping her autistic nephew alive, despite his possession and her own loss, is indicative of this strength. And it also shows just the love that she has for this child who is possessed by this otherworldly entity that's trying to hurt her and debases her and degrades her and has taken everything from her and is ruining the lives of those around her. She is wily, she is smart, she is strong, and all of this is a part of the conclusion of the novel. And the other characters as well. No one acts out of character. Cammy is motivated by the death of her child. Seth. We see his actions, we see his beliefs, we see his thought processes. We see him doing what he can to help and to stop Tack. So I would say that it's an appropriate conclusion to the characters. The next question: does it successfully wrap up the plot? Specifically, do the events build upon one another with consistency? I would say yes, but in order for this to work as well as it does, it requires you to buy into the plot. It requires you to understand the bending of reality. It requires you to understand the nature of Tack, the role of moto cops in westerns. And despite all of these weird, wild, imaginative elements, it all comes down to laxative. It's not going to be the last time that King incorporates toilet-based fear into his story, but it's important to note that the natural act of defecation is so unclean to this otherworldly creature that it must vacate its possessed body. It sounds stupid, but remember, this is important. King takes the big ideas of the novel, all right? This supernatural entity, one that is able to literally reshape reality itself. Like that's hard to really wrap your head around, and it's hard to buy into the emotion of that. But what King does so well is that he's able to take these big ideas and at times what seem to be unfathomable ideas that are so alien to the reader that is difficult to get behind. he takes these ideas, but he's able to ground them with something so recognizable. And in this case, an essential bodily function. So your mileage may vary on your enjoyment of this as a plot device and your enjoyment of whether or not it works as a legitimate plot device. But if you examine the novel as this war between an otherworldly entity and someone of this world, I mean, what better way to demonstrate being a living organism from the planet Earth than having to take a shit? I mean, it sounds crass, but hey, remember, everybody poops. It is a thing that happens, and I think that it's a biological act. So it really shows the inhumanity and the alienness of this creature. So I understand anyone that might think that it's stupid. I understand. I just don't happen to agree. I think that it really, if anything, it supports the humanity of the characters. And it's just, you know, as I stated, it's not the last time that King is going to kick open the doors of the bathroom to reveal some sort of horror. And I think that there's something to be said about that. We all go to the bathroom, and let's examine this portion of our lives that we spend in the bathroom on the grandest stage of all, in the climax of a horror story. I think I'm fine with it, and I think that the events here they do build upon one another. There's a mad, desperate rush to the end of this novel with all of the characters attempting to get out of the predicament that they have found themselves in. So despite the surreality of it, there is a ticking time bomb nature to it. And the plans of each of the characters collide that ultimately end with the deaths of major characters and the elimination of the main villain. So, does the conclusion serve the theme, the symbolism, and the motifs? I'm gonna be honest. Uh, you know, on a, it's not as if I reread the novel for the purposes of the review of the ending. I'm going off of my the review that I had done of the novel itself and the Wikipedia summary. But in terms of a deeper theme, I don't know if there is one. So I smarter people and smarter listeners than I will be able to point that out. And if you do, if you can point towards deeper themes within the novel that collide and are extrapolated upon in the conclusion, please write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. The next question, it doesn't necessarily work against a novel if the answer is no, but it certainly helps if the answer is yes. And that is, what is the most famous scene in the novel, and does it appear in the conclusion of the story? I would say the most famous scene, if there is a famous scene, and I think that this novel, like many of the non film or TV versions of a Stephen King story, just suffer from the lack of cultural awareness. So I don't think there really is a famous scene, but if there was a famous scene, I probably would point to the arrival of the Regulators, which happens at the beginning of the story, not the end. Are there other factors that we need to consider? Yeah, it's a weird-ass book. We need to consider that. It is among the most surreal that Stephen King has done. He's literally, rewriting reality and making up his own rules as he goes along, but I don't think that should be counted against him because it is done really well. He's playing with a story of imagination in a tale where the imagination of a child can physically harm those around him. It's like that Twilight Zone episode. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the famous one where the boy can do whatever he wants with his mind. The one that was spoofed on The Simpsons many moons ago. So it's King through Bachman taking a stab at that, and I would say it's a more successful version than that Twilight Zone episode. Yeah, come at me. That's what I believe. So it's a weird book. You have to get behind the weirdness to truly understand it. On the flip side, Desperation very much is in line with what Stephen King was doing at that time with big ideas and the characters, the struggles that they are going through. Their shadows. Really, it's just like the struggles that they're going through. There is a light right in front of them, and their shadows are playing out, on more of an apocalyptic, epic scale. So in Desperation, it's a fight for survival for them, but really at the core, it's another story of good versus evil, and characters having to not just survive, but vanquish and this version of ultimate evil with tack. And here it is, like I've said, it is just a strange blend of so many stories. You have, suburban malaise. You have the imagination of childhood. You have you have sensibilities and iconography of westerns and early '90s cartoons, and just the 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 lawns and the lifestyle of the suburbs just all colliding into one and becoming this nightmare hellscape. And it's the return of Bachman, which is also so weird. Bachman, who Stephen King had killed in so many ways, publicly. If you look at the biography, Richard Bachman is dead. Richard Bachman is a person that does not live anymore. And this book was published only because his widow, quote unquote, found the novel and was able to publish it. So at this point, everyone knew the Richard Bachman pseudonym was really Stephen King, and Stephen King famously had written The Dark Half, and The Dark Half was another way to kill Richard Bachman because he was dealing with duality. He was dealing with pseudonyms. He was dealing with the public fallout from having his pseudonym be known, and he was playing with all of these ideas within a Stephen King novel and having a Stephen King-like character fight a Richard Bachman-like character. And Richard Bachman comes back to give this flip version of Desperation. So it's another fact that we have to consider. So with all of that said, personal, subjectively, do I like the ending? Yes, I do like the ending of this novel, and I'm very much a big fan of this novel. But who cares about what I think? Can we objectively state whether or not it is a good ending for everything? So I haven't answered no to any of these questions. I was only able to answer I don't know to one of them. And I think that from a plot perspective, from a character perspective, certainly these are very true to what has come before. I think that these are natural payoffs to both the plot and the characters. Can't really speak about the theme, but I think that it works from a plot and a character standpoint. So that leads us to the tallies. So as of right now, I happen to like 26 out of 27 endings that I've discussed. And objectively speaking, I've been able to determine that 24 out of 27 endings have been good. So that's where we are with that. I think that in terms of batting average, Stephen King's doing pretty good in terms of endings. So that's all I got for the Regulators ending. I hope that everyone had a grand old time listening to this. Thank you for coming back. For new listeners, thank you for tuning in. If this is your first episode, welcome. You might have heard some weird licking noises. That would be my long-term fuzzy co-host, maybe my 13-year-old pug, who is chilling beside me on the couch right now. And you might have heard my name being called a couple times as my daughter was fighting off going to sleep from upstairs. Longtime listeners, thank you for your continual support throughout the years. I think I'm coming on to the 7th year anniversary of this podcast, which is wild. And so if anyone has any thoughts, please write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. And the biggest thing that anyone could do to help me out is to go on over to iTunes and leave a review, not just a rating, but an actual review and a subscription. That would really help me out a lot. And yeah, that's all that I got for now. But make sure that you come back next week, and may have long days and pleasant nights. And I will see you here next time, where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.